Hey YouTube! Yeah, so continuing on from yesterday with my why Japanese guitar best, whatever it was I said. It was I kind of want to talk about the Westone Thunder and the concept behind it. Why it's one of the most important guitars ever made, I think. You might never have seen one. Your Luther might have told you that all Japanese guitars are rubbish. But they're awfully good. The thing I don't actually. Well, I own a bass. It's been painted. It was originally looked sort of like this. This is just the Thunder 1, so the cheapest one. There's a 1A which has an active boost in it, which if it's there, it's fine. It's an 18 volt and it's an old system. It's not a super mega useful thing, the active boost. Same with the basses. And then you get a Thunder 2, which is a set neck. This is a bolt neck. You get the Thunder 2, which is a set neck, and then you get the Thunder 3, which are actually quite expensive, which is a through neck. But basically, most of the other bits are kind of the same. Yeah, so you got to remember when this came out. This came out in 1980, 1981, something like that. And at the time, I was talking here about the Japanese guitar things. The best guitars you could buy at the time were pretty much Japanese, and they were actually cheaper than the American ones at Fender. Nobody goes on about how great their 1980 Fender, 1980 Gibson is, because they were the bean counters had come in at both those companies. So in the 70s they were. The 80s they weren't very good. That was how the Japanese kind of got in. They started off making just copies, just cheap copies, as you get your, I suppose, the equivalent of Squire and Harley Benton and all that just now. It's a cheap copy of a Squire Strat or a Strat or a Les Paul or whatever. And then at some point they decided they were going to try and make them, but it was make them better. Or why are we copying the current line? Why are we copying the late 70s Strat? What people, the story goes, the guy, Mr. Arai, from Aria. It was actually a misprint the first time they put Aria on it. And it was like, no, Aria is actually a musical thing. That's a good name. That's better than Arai. And it was like, we went to some guitar show and everyone was, swooning over, pre CBS Fenders was what everyone was wanting. They didn't like the new ones, and it was like, why are we copying the current guitars? Why don't we copy the old ones, the ones that people like? Hence, something like that white Strat in the corner there is just a brand's Tempest. It's a Fujigen factory, just a Strat, and it's mid 70s, and it's probably just the same as an American, or better, probably closer to a CBS one than what Fender were doing at the time. They're just all the cost cutting to try to make them cheaper and make them out of lead and stuff. I've played a few of them. They're now worth money. They never used to be. I remember when, you could pick up 70s and 80s Gibsons and Fenders pretty cheap, because they weren't very good. But now, I think you'll find it says Fender on it, therefore it's really good. Okay. Yeah, so when this came out, it was a revelation, and it kind of, everyone shat it basically, especially Fender. Well, Fender basically decided that they were not able to compete, so they basically made Fender Japan, so that rather than just have these other people making guitars that were kind of better than them, they would own them and sell them as well, and then intentionally downgrade them a bit so the American ones were a bit better. Because obviously, I don't actually own. I've got an American Fender Music Master bass. That wasn't. It's not. You can argue again. It's not a full Fender. It was made in America by the same people, but it was like, I think the idea was it was like they got newer people to build it. So if you were just starting, for the first 6 months, you would build the student line. And then once you learn how to do it really well, then you would move on to building the proper guitars. I think that's, you never know about these things. Some of it's just stories. Yeah. But I mean, so we're coming in. We've got a guitar that's coming in. It's not the cheapest guitar you can get. Slightly more expensive than crap ones. So you could buy possibly even Japanese Les Paul copies and stuff like that, which the machine heads were trash, and the bridge was made of pot metal, and the pickups weren't even real humbuckers, and it was like plywood, and it had a bent plywood sheet over the top and all that. But it looked like I think round about that time, you're talking about £100 in 1980 money sort of thing got you that, and I think you went to like about 140 or something for something like this. So about percentage wise, a good bit more, but a Fender Strat would be 300, twice the price of this sort of thing, and a Les Paul would be even more than that. But on this one, as I was saying, one of the reasons I enjoyed working on it so much, this is all original. The The switch is a Switchcraft one, so it's been replaced at some point. Everyone else is original, but with a jack socket, they break on anything. Yeah, so comes as standard Gotoh tuners, proper tuners, good ones. These are 40-year-old, 39 years old, and they're still feel like new. Well, these was a bit of a wipe, and a wee bit of tightening them up and stuff like that. A set of Gotoh tuners, look them up on eBay for new ones. And you start going, oh, that guitar's a bit of a bargain. Pickups, good. Whatever they are. They say MMK45 in the back, but I'm still not. I've had pickups that say MMK45 in the back, and they're very different. You get ones that are like, they kind of look like DiMarzio Super Distortions and sound like DiMarzio Super Distortions, with the hexagonal poles, and then these ones don't. These have got like sort of normal round poles on them, and these sound more like sort of your Gibson-y type pickups rather than being Super Distortions. Hard tail because it's a cheap one, but it's through strung with a metal bit. Brass bridge, brass saddles, money, brass knobs, proper, not cheap brass, proper brass knobs. Obviously that doesn't make a difference to the sound. Coil split, dual coil split, which wasn't a big thing. Not a lot of guitars had, especially like factory built guitars would have a coil split. So this, arguably, I think it was BC Rich that kind of started doing Schecter as well. We're doing, like humbuckers that split into single coils or fancy wiring. This comes with it as standard. It's basically simple. Down, both of these are humbuckers. You could choose either or both, and then up, both of these are single coils. You can either choose bridge, neck, or both. So 6 sounds rather than 3, and 3 of them are. So you got this. It's like, oh, it's a sort of Gibson-y thing. Yeah, if you don't put that switch, you got like an SG or a Les Paul or something like that, roughly sound wise. This is a Gibson scale, so it's a 24 3/4 inch scale. Just double check that. Yeah, so this is a Gibson scale guitar. They did actually do another one, which I could look out, called the Concord at the time, which wasn't as popular. But if you think of it as being a Strat, so it's Strat scale. Originally, or not originally, but the one I've got is the same body shape as this, apart from it's got a Strat trem. It's still got 2 humbuckers, and it's got a maple neck, which is 25 and a half, and a 6-a-side headstock instead of 3-a-side. So there's like, but it's because it's got the humbuckers, it's kind of like a Strat, but it does Gibson sounds, whereas this is a Gibson, but it does Fender sounds. Those things, and just the general quality of build of these is better. I mean, the guy who likes to comment and things like that about his luthier who tells him their shit, if he's run for 40 years, Japanese guitars weren't always amazing. I maybe didn't stipulate that earlier on. In the 70s, you did get cheap copy because they started making cheap copies, so some of them are cheap copies. Once they got the hang of it, so you start finding in the 70s, I think Yamahas were always brilliant. I think there's 60s Yamahas, one called a Flying Banana. I think they look fucking amazing. I want one. But I think they were like a pro level, whereas a lot of the cheapy ones come out after that. But the time it got to sort of mid-70s, that's when Gibson Fender started wanting to sue them, and there was problems like not wanting to, they wouldn't let shops stock them and stuff because you're going to go into the shop and play the tune and go, that one's a third of the price and just as good. There's a bit of that going on, but there was problems with the famous lawsuit where Ibanez got hit with a lawsuit, but by that point Ibanez had given up, so there was never a lawsuit because the Ibanez had already given up making copies of Les Pauls. They were already making their artist series and things like this, which is the genuine attempt at improving the electric guitar by it doing kind of both the Fender and the Gibson thing. And it's like, look at the wood it's made of. I don't know if it's really shown up here, look. I mean, it's not cheap shit, and it's a laminate neck. 3 pieces of wood, so that's not going to twist. The wee things like that, it's a better design than, not as iconic. It wasn't first. Again, I said before, a modern guitar. This still now, if you basically, if this could say the Westone Thunder didn't exist, and you brought out a new line of guitars that were exactly this, it would be, ultra modern guitar. It's 40 years old, this design, but still modern. Okay, now it would have fluence pickups and stuff like that, but there's not that many real changes. Basically all the guitars you get now are pretty much the ones from the 50s. Not really, manufacturing has improved. So So they're less hand-built. Another thing about these, hand-built, to a certain extent, finished by the same person. So they were right up with the technology of having the CNC to route out the bodies and all that crap. But they were actually assembled by a person in a wee sort of, in a big, I've seen a picture of it, like an aircraft hangar type thing with all these wee units where everyone's got like sort of like a half garden shed with their equipment in it, and they'd basically go and get a body and a neck and go around the parts box, get the bits, and then they would assemble it and finish it and do the building of the guitar and then the finishing. So you get hand-built guitars, and the quality control is not just somebody at the end check it to make sure it's all right. The quality control on these is ridiculous, as in it's kind of, someone's happy, oh, you need to give you a shot at my Westone Thunder and you can do a video on it. It's like, why? It's the same as this one, because they're all the same. They're all awesome. It doesn't have that random element which you get in a lot of guitars, even with the Fenders and the Gibsons, you know, from the 50s and stuff. You had a random element where 1 in 10 would be pure amazing, you know what I mean, and 1 in 10 would be just a shite one, and then all the rest are in the middle somewhere. But you know, it wasn't a case of everyone, whereas every one of these was the same. Obviously the caveat there is if you get one now, then it might have been dropped, bashed, burnt, blah, bits missing, bits changed, all that stuff. So they're not all exactly the same now, but if you fix them up, get them tuned up, they are. The basis was the same. They all left the factory the same. Yeah. So the amp got on. Tuners on. That's why. There we go. Yeah. So neck pickup single coil. Playing through the orange TH30. I do have a reverb pedal on. Single coil on the bridge. I think I might raise the action up on this a little bit. It's a wee bit, just slightly on the spanky side. Yeah, it should be alright. Maybe just a wee bit. Oh, I need to do yeah. This is me testing it to make sure it's finished, ready to go back. And both on. My favourite with the split coils. Bridge humbucker. Both humbuckers. Neck humbucker. Neck humbucker. 2 tones. But obviously for humbuckers you want the rat pedal on, and then this will be a fire breathing beast, I think. And this guitar, I don't reckon, has been played in about 10 years, so it takes a wee bit of time for it to vibrate up and get all. That's the same with all guitars. If you get a guitar that hasn't been played in 10 or 20 years, you can clean it up and put strings on it, but really play it for half a dozen hours, and it'll suddenly, whoa, it'll come back. It'll come back to life. It's still asleep, poor thing. something in D, I'll never play in E. So basically I just played there over the drum track, which doesn't really fit, but there you go. Just like, it sounds like drums, the kick drums a wee bit off in it. It can't be me that's wrong, must be the automatic drum pedal. Almost managed to drown out the out of time drums there. Yeah, so really owe it yourself to try out these things. Don't go by what other people tell you. Try it. Well worth it. I mean, and again, which I didn't really get to. I mean, I know we're talking about the Fender Japan being. My view would be the Japanese Fender is fighting with an American one, and it's better than a Mexican one. Is where I think it sits. The problem with that comes in, it's like there's a Japanese Fender. There's a Tempest, not just same factory, so kind of that's got more in common with that, and that than it does with an American vendors kind of. And okay, the Japanese vendors are not as cheap as these. Are, you know, maybe twice the price of this. A different factory. This is Matsumoku. That's Fujigen, but they're both. They're the thing like, see, like Klingons. The Japanese are a bit Klingonish. It's like honor and all that. So it's like the fight that they were having in the 80s, the early 80s. That's where I was buying my guitars, because all these guitar companies were fighting to make the best guitar that you can get for $200 or something like that. Not the business model, which it's been ever since, where it's like the best guitars are the ones where you can make the most money on them. That's not what the principle behind any of these things were. They still made enough money to, I think it was more, you know, we'll sell enough of them to make a profit sort of thing. But I mean, there was nothing like the same profit in this guitar as there was in a Fender or a Gibson. You know, it probably cost about the same to build. Probably the materials would be more expensive. It's more expensive hardware, probably, but with wages being a bit different stuff, they probably cost the same to build. The difference is that, you know, you add 30% to the price of building this and sell it, whereas the big factories, you add 170% onto the price of how it costs to get there. That's why Gibsons are $2,500. Let's be honest, it's not because they cost $2,500 to build. No. And that's why you don't get guitars like this anymore. Or if you do get guitars like this now, FGN still make them. They've got like a budget range, £500-600 sort of thing. Actually, I've got Scott's one sitting there, the video on that. Kind of, a lot of the principles are kind of similar to this. No advertising, all that. So you're buying a guitar for slightly more than it costs to build, rather than buying a guitar for 50 times what it costs to build. Again, that's where you come in with it. And again, I'm saying this is better than like a Gibson Les Paul or something like that, but you've got to look at it as the angle of how much does a Gibson Les Paul costs to buy second hand or a new one or whatever. Maybe probably not 10 times as much, 5 times or something as much, and at the bare minimum fight worthy. I do get the fact that, you know, if you're not going to pick up a Squier Classic Vibe and a £1,500 Fender custom shop and not be able to tell the difference, right? That obviously it costs 3 times as much. It's going to be quite obvious from everything, from all the playing and the sounds, that it's not as good a guitar. But when comparing like a Fender Japan to a Fender American, there's a fight in it. It's not like, oh, that one's better. No, there's and the same with something like this, but this has got advantages over a lot of guitars. Build being the one that's my big thing, build quality. That talking about, you know, just the way it's assembled, because it's done by hand by one person, someone who's done hundreds of them. They know exactly what they're doing. It's like you get a master building something like this, not somebody who's getting paid £1 a day to stick this into this. What's that? That's a guitar, yeah. What's that? It's one of the guitar parts. It's called a pickup. Oh, is it a pickup it's called? Yeah, that goes here. You know, it's not that. People building this knew what all the parts were and what it was and how it did it. And I mean, style-wise, I mean, to be honest, I really like it. I was not really a big fan of the look of these ones, just because you don't see a lot of them, but you see a lot of them compared to some of the other Westone models. I do actually have I've got a couple of Westones. Well, I've got the bass, Thunder. I don't actually have a Thunder guitar, although I've had a few through my hands, and they're always amazing. It's kind of almost a joy to work on. Same as the Aria Cardinal I had in a couple of weeks ago. I mean, they're so much nicer than. Okay, maybe they're not. The components aren't that much better than like a really expensive guitar, but if you're looking at guitars that cost similar sort of money, you know, like any modern guitar basically, I mean modern anything from the mid-80s onwards, is they probably went to Samick, which are great, you know, they make good guitars, but they don't touch it. There's not even a fight in it. There's nothing in it. Or, you know, if you're looking at like a modern Epiphone, you get modern Epiphones are £600-700. Put it up against this, it's got nothing. There's no fight whatsoever in it, and this is to buy probably about, might be even cheaper than, like, you know, like the desirable Korean Epiphone Les Pauls. The good ones, once you've upgraded the pickups and stuff, they're whoa, fuck, they're nearly as good as a Gibson. It's like, no, it doesn't touch this, and this doesn't have upgraded pickups. You don't need to upgrade the pickups. It's already got the right ones in it. It's a huge difference. So, I mean, the thing is, worth it. Give it a go. Have a look. Don't knock something like this, but do what I do. If it's something you don't know about, look these up. This is probably one of the best Japanese guitars to get first, because if you go on eBay, there will be some for sale. And you can look at them and you can see how much, and look in the completed list and see what they go for, how much they sell for. I don't know what they go for. I remember these being like £100, 150 sort of thing for a clean one type thing. They're not that anymore. They're now 350, 400, something like that. But if you look at see what they sold for recently, you got it up here. All right, for example, I've not actually looked it up, but so you can see one that's maybe a bit dirty, get bits missing, kind of goes for 300, and one that's in really good condition goes for 450. So basically you go right, well. So you know what it is you're buying. Have a wee look about. Don't just buy one this week. Have a wee look for a couple of weeks and see till one grabs your fancy. It might be an interesting colour or something. And then give it a shot. And then you're not going to lose that much money, because if you buy, if they sell for £300 anyway, and you can just keep looking, you maybe pick one up for £250. You know that you can have that, play it for a couple of months, play it next year. Vendors and stuff like that, and then see how it actually stacks up against them, and then I don't like it. Well, sell it, and you've lost the postage sort of thing. You'll get your money back. It's not going to. They're only going to go up. Keep it for a year. It's going to be worth more money after it. Really. So it's a win-win, really. I mean, I've done that with a lot of guitars. Just buying them. But basically, because I can fix guitars, I tend to buy them with bits missing and broken. So it's pretty rare I get one that's complete. Well, this one was pretty dirty. It's something on the fretboard that I scraped off with a Stanley knife. That was there was a lot of it. I don't know what it was. It looked like somebody maybe tried to coat it in wax or something. I don't know. But this is a guitar that's been sitting in the amount of fluff in it. Not neglected as opposed to abused. So it's just been sitting in an attic in the open for 20 years or something like that. But now it's absolutely wonderful, and I'm a huge fan of the Westone Thunder, even though I don't own one. I do have a Westone Prestige 227, which is this shape, but it's the top of the range one, so it's got a carved top. It's an amazing pink to red sunburst. It's got a Bendmaster tremolo on it. It's got an ebony fingerboard, and it's got like 5-ply binding all the way around. It's like the luxury model. It's a through neck as well. So I've kind of got a Thunder. You say, I don't have a Westone Thunder. Yeah, but I've kind of got one. It's not actually called a Thunder, but if it was called a Thunder, it'd be like a Thunder 3. Basically, I bought it because I really liked the colour, and I wanted to see what an expensive Westone was like, because I'm all for these are the cheapest ones. The one is the cheapest one, so there's no binding, no fancy shit. Everything on it is necessary, and everything on it is brilliant. Kind of want to talk about the Roadster, which is basically it's more stratty than this, but the same thing. You've got a humbucker in it. It does everything. It's probably, was it a 1986 Strat? The thing is, in 1986, the only Fender Strats that were getting made in the world were, like, actual Fenders were made by Fujigen at the same time they were making that. So there was like a year or two when the Fender was moving the American factory so they didn't make any. The only Fenders you could buy were made in Japan, because they own Fender Japan as well, made in Fujigen. So it's like, it's bizarre, but us guitarists are a bit weird. If all that mattered was functionality, I'm going to go into the RG again. Well, it's a PGM, but you know what I mean? Your Steve Vai guitar. If you think of, like a Les Paul or an SG or a Strat being like a Harley, I don't know anything about motorbikes, by the way, but like it being like a Harley Davidson or something like that, which look cool as fuck and a great big powerful engine, fantastic. But you get like a Japanese race bike, like one of the ones that looks like it's made of like just bits of plastic, looks like a stormtrooper sort of thing, like a from Star Wars, that kind of thing. I would probably rather have the Harley Davidson. I would never rather have the Harley Benton. I'd rather have the Harley Benton than a punch in the face, I suppose. But so I can see the things are different. But if you're wanting to go around a track as fast as you can, well, the Harley Davidson's not going to compete with it. If you're wanting to do 200 mile an hour or whatever, who's got the fastest acceleration? It's like every component of it is totally designed for speed and efficiency. That's what an RG is, but it doesn't necessarily look pretty. But I think this one does look pretty. This is kind of a little bit more traditional. But it's like, if all that mattered was how something sounded and how something played, everyone would play RGs. They wouldn't make any more other guitars anymore. And that's to me. I've only got one when I don't even really play. I've not really learned how to play it yet. I kind of like that one better, to be honest, because it's a bit more like your Harley Davidson. It's a bit cooler, comfy, not for efficiency and speed, just for special. Don't go fast and all that, but not quite the same. But I'm enjoying this. Getting back at talking more about the Japanese guitars again. I keep having other ones in, and it's like they're fine. Modern guitars are all right. It's just don't be going knocking things that you've not tried yourself. Westone Thunders are shite. Oh, are they really? What's your experience of them? Oh, my friend said. Oh, I looked them up on the internet. That's not the same. Get a shot of one. Even if you might find one in a shop you can get a wee shot of. Something like that. Or as I said, if you're looking on eBay, or if you're looking at your local Gumtree or Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, you might find them, it might be 50 quid cheaper than what you get on eBay, so you can buy it, arse about with it, play with it, hire it for a year. You know what I mean? Basically lend the guitar your money for a year, play it, enjoy it, and after a year you don't like it, you'll probably get that back, and you'll probably end up, the only thing you've lost is the joy you had playing a guitar, and once you played it, immediately, they're amazing. But once you start getting used to them and you start knowing what to look for, they get more amazing. Same as, if I get a guitar, sometimes it's brilliant and you get it, and then later on you start going, oh, it's a wee bit spanky on that fret, and I don't really like this, and it's a bit neck heavy, and all these things kind of come in later after the initial wow. With the 80s Japanese stuff, it just... And it's like, I'm now at the stage, I know what to expect, so I don't, I can buy odd ones and not really know what it is, but just because of the heritage of it, I know what it should be to work it in, so I can pick up a guitar like one of these that doesn't really play very well, and it's like, but there's something very wrong with this, because I know it should be really good. So it's like, the truss rod, all the frets out, things that break. And a lot of the time these things break because and it's like the other thing with these is like, see, if you ever find one that doesn't have the tuners on it, it's very unlikely that the tuners were upgraded. It's more likely that the tuners were taken off this and used to upgrade something else. And same with other bits, it's like you're there because obviously what's cooler? Oh, I'm playing Jimi Hendrix. It's like you want a white Strat, you don't want this for playing Jimi Hendrix, because you're playing Jimi Hendrix, you need a white Strat, which I get, I understand it, got one. I'd have that over, to be honest, I'd have that over an American Fender if I had to pay for it, because it's 95% of an American standard thingy, and it costs between 5 and 10% as much. When it's 95%, it's good. I don't think there would necessarily be much of a fight in it, because obviously if you offer me, I'll take the American one. Yeah, it's worth much more money, but I've had to buy it myself. But that's like one. I've never seen anything of that make before. I actually got to try that. I was going out to a guy's house in Bishop Briggs, and it was like, I think it's a Japanese Strat. I was like, alright, okay, went in. He's like, I had an amp set up, sat down, went, there's the money. I was 100% ready to walk away. Don't need another Strat. Wasn't expecting that. As soon as I played that, it was like, that's just the same as my Japanese Fenders. The headstock's not quite the right shape and all that, but does that matter? That one's even got good pickups in it, like proper Nico pickups. Really? Sometimes you get the older Japanese guitars, especially the Les Paul copies, where the actual neck and the body are pretty good, but whoever it was spec'd them because they've been ordered from a shop in the UK or something, or whatever the shop is, wherever you live, and they've the option, here's the bass guitar, you can have it with hardware setup A, hardware setup B, hardware setup C. Hardware setup C is this level, all Goto stuff, and hardware level A is as cheap as we can get tuners that actually tune the guitar. So although it looks like the body and the neck are the same, the rest of the build's still there, but the pickups are, the bridges, not quite. But obviously Matsumoku were doing that for years. This Westone's actually, I've not even mentioned that, were Matsumoku's house brand. So they had actually an R&D department who was actually designing these guitars, and they were making them for themselves. So another one had cut out the middleman. So you're no longer giving money to Aria, Vox, Epiphone, whoever it was that they were building guitars for. They were building them with their own name on it, Westone. Westones originally were they were building Westones before they started the company. Some American company called Westone. So you got Matsumoto made Westones in the 70s, but the company went under and they bought the name Westone, and then the actual, call them real Westones. They're not the original, but you know what I mean. When this type of Westone came out, 1980, I think, when they started making their own ones, it's like this, and you'll see they kept going for up until the factory closed, and then they did what everyone else did. Once the factory closed, they sold the name to somebody who made guitars in Korea, and it's like, unfortunately, they were never going to be able to compete with like all the other companies that moved to Korea, your Jacksons and Kramers and stuff like that, who were basically making exactly the same guitar but a slightly different shape. But Jackson, Kramer, there. See, I've seen shred metal people. Nobody really played Westones. There's a good Westone site as well, westoneinfo.com. If you look up that, that's got all the catalogues and stuff like that. You can see exactly what it is you're getting. I have a preference for the earlier ones, sort of up to 84. This is 84. This is kind of the last of the best ones, because when I say they got cheaper, they didn't get that much cheaper, but this one's lost the brass nut. It should have in 1983. This would have had a brass nut, and it would have a different logo on the headstock as well. It would have that on it. This is an 83. It's got I don't like that logo very much. It's a cartoony one. Doesn't actually say Matsumoto. It does say made in Japan on the backplate. This one does say a Matsumoto product, but it's got a brass nut. So in 1984, you lost the brass nut. Save a couple of quid, fair enough, and then it lost the brass knobs, and it just got a lot. It just got cheaper. They were still built really well though. So if you get an 84, 85, 86 one, they're still amazing guitars, just not quite as high spec. They down spec them a little bit later on. Round about 82, 83 seems to be the magic number for most of the guitars I like. There's a few extra ones. That one's 86. It's a wee bit later. Ibanez were a wee bit different. They never went to Korea at that point. Partly, I think, because of Steve Vai's guitar, which were horrendously expensive. The original Gem, that's a PGM, but you know what I mean. They were really expensive, and it was really high. And he just broke at the right time with this new guitar. It became the thing to have, and suddenly Ibanez were like, "We got a hit!" And then they stopped making Roadsters looking like that. They started making them looking like that. Oh, that's an RG. And then now once the Steve Vai one came out, the RGs tended to look like that instead. So that put away. But that's like sort of the last of the cheap Japanese guitars. I would still class this as a cheap Japanese guitar, as in bottom of the range one. And bottom of the range as in it doesn't have fancy inlays and binding, but all the rest of it is the same as the top of the range one. So buy a Westone, get yourself a Westone Thunder. I'm not as keen on the Spectrum series. They are really good, but this is a personal preference. So my first bass was a Spectrum bass and I hated it because I thought it looked shit. So that's kind of stuck with me forever. Unfortunately, they've got a matte painted black neck. I don't really like painted matte black neck, and the shape's not quite this. It's a little bit, I don't know. That's purely aesthetic though, but they are awesome guitars. They've got maple bodies, so they're quite heavy. But I don't actually have any Westone Spectrums anymore. I really like the Concorde H2, the one I've got. It's one of the best guitars I've got actually. Again, it's the cheaper one. And in some ways I even like it better than the Prestige one, which is the top of the range Westone at the time. It's like, just because, I don't know, it's the whole idea of having stuff you don't need on it. Like, I should have brought down my Washburn Falcon with its inch thick rosewood cap and everything's brass and ebony, and it's just like, none of those things really make it sound any different. It makes it look really fancy, but you're a man. You want what matters. Muscle and power and feel and sound and all that, not necessarily looks, really. Rock on. Catch you later.